Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Untangle 101 webinar series. Today, we'll be discussing Untangle's NG Firewall product and how we can help you manage your captive portal and all the bring your own devices that enter your network. If you're unfamiliar with Untangle, then this webinar is perfect for you. My name is Shannon Bonfiglio. I'm part of the marketing team here at Untangle, and I'll be your host today. I also have one of our sales engineers, Chad McNaughton, who will be taking us through the presentation and demonstration today. Just a few housekeeping rules before we get started. If you do have any audio issues, please be sure you're selecting the correct audio preference on the right-hand side. If you do select to use a phone, you will need to dial in and use the access code that is provided. As always, we'll be answering questions throughout the webinar. We have a couple staff members on hand to help with those questions, so please just submit those questions in the Q&A box on the right-hand side. And as a reminder, this webinar is being recorded, so you'll be able to rewatch or revisit areas that you want to follow up on. And if we don't get to your question, or if you have a very specific question, you can always email us at sales@untangle.com. And with that, I'll pass it over to Chad.
All right, thank you, Shannon. Just to reiterate, as Shannon said, everyone, this is an Untangle 101 webinar. So we don't do deep dives into technical aspects or apps, things like that. This is going to be a very broad talk about BYOD, and then I'll show you on our demo server how that kind of looks and what you would set up basically to capture, basically public devices, BYOD on your Wi-Fi, on your local network, whatever you want to do. BYOD is obviously kind of exploding here the last couple of years. A lot of that comes down to budget. It's often cheaper for businesses to allow employees to use their own devices rather than purchasing them for the entire company, things like that, schools as well. You can see some of my stats here on the screen. In North America alone, the adoption rates of BYOD are up quite a bit here over the last couple of years. We're at 50% adoption rates here for corporate America. Like I said, a BYOD plan can save businesses thousands of dollars every year in device and software costs. If you're not having to license the software on those public devices, that's a big, big chunk of your budget. About 59% of organizations are allowing employees to use their own devices for work purposes. That's a very important delineation, I think, for work purposes. So that right there is where something like Untangle can come in, because we can say, public Wi-Fi, employee Wi-Fi, BYOD networks have access to these rules, these apps, these websites, et cetera, and I'll show you how we set all that up. The little pie chart down here, you can see, are you currently allowing BYOD? It's a pretty big majority that is. You can see the little slice of green there. We have no plans to allow the use of personal devices for work purposes. That's a pretty small slice of pie there, and it's shrinking. So this is becoming kind of the new standard, in not only in the corporate world, but it's also creeping into academia as well as K through 12 environments. You can see on the right there some of the biggest reasons, obviously, for allowing BYOD are to protect information and secure future risk, things like that. We want to reduce exposure no matter the device. So if I come onto your network with my cell phone, my tablet, whatever it is, it's better to know that I'm being filtered, that I'm actually protected behind something like Untangle, because it's going to cover a lot of different things. Like I said, reducing risk. We want to boost productivity, saving money, then all the way down to employees' demands. Maybe they want to be able to use their own devices rather than a company-owned device. Me personally, I'm an old enough guy that I would live through the IT on-call days and always had to have an on-call cell phone, and that thing was just paranoia incarnate. I was always worried about the company phone. So where's the phone? How's the phone? So just being able to use your own device just takes a little bit of that stress off folks too, I think. And then obviously, data breaches are the new, more significant kind of reason. Being able to let people on your network with their own devices is a nice thing, but without some filtering or some protection in front of those devices, it's pretty scary. That's kind of the Wild West there. There are quite a few challenges, obviously. I mentioned a couple of them already, but having company data on a personal device does increase, attack vectors, things like that. You become a target. Just a lack of visibility for devices that connect to the network, I think, is the #1 problem. That's what I was just talking about. If I come on the network with my cell phone, it's your network. You're providing access to that network. So you get to set the rules. So if I bring my device on your network, you get to monitor me, you get to filter me, and you get to shape my traffic. So the visibility into BYOD is a huge thing, not only for public entities, but even for a little private company. If folks are using their own devices, there just has to be something in your IT usage policy that tells them we're looking at this traffic. So we can do that through our captive portal, because that is one of the biggest reasons for all of this, is getting visibility into those devices and their traffic. You can see the biggest inhibitors to BYOD adoption are security and employee privacy. That's changing a little bit, obviously. For better or worse, privacy standards are changing, in the States and throughout the world. So as you can see, 1 in 5 organizations have experienced a data breach via BYOD. So to me, that's almost unacceptable. You bring your own device onto my network and we're getting malware or ransomware because of your device. So with something like Untangle in front of those devices, it just reduces that exposure, and you just don't have to worry about it. You can see some of the little graphs up there in the top right cloud are, just how fast things are changing. 5 out of 6 large companies have been victimized now. About 317 million new malwares we've created here in the last year or so. There's a lot of data out there to point to what we're talking about, but the bottom line is you have to have visibility, and you have to be able to protect and filter the data to and from those devices. So that's when we would introduce you to Untangle. Untangle is a comprehensive UTM solution. That's a unified threat management device. We're no longer just a content filter. We're not just a firewall. This is a UTM box. So we do focus on small and medium-sized businesses still, with state and local governments. Untangle is very quick and easy to deploy. You can manage it centrally through our cloud in Command Center. And honestly, it's going to help you protect pretty much everything that your business holds valuable. I think one of the biggest, positives about Untangle and that kind of statement right there is we do focus on small and medium-sized businesses, and we actually are a small business. There's still only around 40 Untangle employees worldwide, maybe 50 now. And to me, that makes a big difference in this industry. We are a solution for small businesses. We use the solution. We support small businesses as one, and we take that seriously. A lot of other solutions in this space don't really cater to small businesses on the account side. They'll give you the software and that kind of thing, but maybe not all the great support. So Untangle is very different in that aspect. It's a very low-cost subscription-based solution. For governments, nonprofits, things like that, we knock a lot off the complete package, 40, 50% off retail. So you can save costs by using your own hardware or one of our little appliances. So if you want to buy sort of a turnkey appliance with Untangle already installed, you can buy that from us. But you don't need an Untangle appliance to run Untangle. You can do that on your own hardware. You can look at our specs online and kind of source your own, build your own. You can also run this virtually or in the cloud environment. So there's a lot of different ways to get Untangle on the network. It can be a really, really easy plug and play setup. So if you have a device that's already doing content filtering, for example, behind a router, it's just a matter of replicating that configuration on the Untangle with like our configuration service, and then we send you the Untangle pre-configured, and it really is kind of a plug and play thing. And we do offer multiple channels of support. In addition to our award-winning support team out here in Colorado, we do offer our user forums. Spiceworks.com I'm our brand rep there and can answer questions. We also offer our wiki, which is written by our engineering and QA teams and has some really, really comprehensive articles, as well as our support knowledge base and our YouTube channel. Within Untangle, you can set up proactive alerts with notification profiles, historical reports. Through Command Center now, our centralized management in the cloud, you can actually set up different notification profiles that tie into webhooks, Slack, PagerDuty, VictorOps, or you can just email the admins. I mentioned the support team here. We do offer advanced support. We can do that remotely. All kinds of different means of getting questions answered and help on your Untangle. And then, the seamless transparency. I think Untangle is a really interesting solution in a transparent bridge mode behind an existing router, because you can just drop us in behind it and let us start scanning traffic and doing our thing without really impacting a network or changing anyone's gateway addresses. So it's a really good way to test Untangle. For example, if you have a box or a virtual environment to install it on, you can download Untangle for 2 weeks for free. It'll be our complete package that includes live support. So if you drop us in a bridge mode on a test box, you get a full 2-week trial with live traffic. So it's an invaluable thing, I think, when you start trying to get Untangle on the network and doing some testing. So the Untangle NG Firewall product is the actual platform for our various applications and modules. If you buy a box from Untangle without purchasing any software subscriptions, it will have that 2-week trial of our complete package, and then at the end of that trial, it will revert to our free package, which offers you things like light versions of spam blocking and application control, firewall, OpenVPN, reporting, some things like that, as well as the captive portal that we're going to talk about. So we basically install apps modules on top of the NG Firewall platform. Our apps are interesting. They do what's called virtual pipelining. So our applications actually inspect a packet simultaneously. So it's not a chain that we're waiting for a packet to get through the Untangle for all these apps to take their turn inspecting. We do that all at once through virtual pipelining. It's a really fast way to do that, and it just speeds things up. We're running Linux Debian, the quicker processes we can do things like that makes everyone's life easier. And then the reports on Untangle, which I'll show you guys, are some of the best you can find. I might be slightly biased, but I do think Untangle's reporting is as good as you'll find in our industry. Our database goes back up to a year. We can offload reports with things like Google Drive or syslog events. And then, like I said, being able to customize everything. I mentioned earlier the reports on the dashboard being customizable. If there's not a report you wanting, see it, we can make a report new from scratch, or we can go find one and just customize it, change 2 or 3 conditions and make it what you're looking for. So don't get frustrated with our reporting. It's a pretty deep rabbit hole, to be honest, between the dashboard and the reports viewer and the reports app. But it's a really, really robust reporting system. So if you jump on the site or our demo server, things like that, you'll see basically a different set of features here on the server itself, and then within the site, it looks about like this. So we have about 6 categories here that we classify all the modules in. As I said, some of these are free apps. Under the protect section there, you'll see firewall intrusion prevention. Those are both free, and then we have virus blocker lite that's free as well. When we filter, that's where web filter and SSL inspector and app control come in. Those are pretty important in 2018 for filtering the internet. We're talking BYOD, so we're going to talk about this here in a little bit, but SSL inspector, for example, is what lets us decrypt HTTPS, so web filter and virus blocker can scan it. So things like that, that are sometimes bundled together, sometimes not. We at least, kind of couple them all together here on our site and organize everything at least a little bit. But you'll see this kind of organization all throughout Untangle. And then as well, we also do performance with WAN failover and balancing, traffic shaping. And you see under add-ons there, the live support. That actually includes our configuration backup module as well. And branding manager, if you're like an MSP type, and you want to change Untangle's logos there and contact information, you can update that to the company's logo and your information. So some of the benefits of the captive portal app that we're going to talk about, number one, like I just mentioned, it's actually free, so that's handy. The legal notice to network users is a big one, because this is where we have to talk about CYA, and you have to get into your IT use policy. So if you have an acceptable use policy, we would want to, more or less paraphrase that in your captive portal page, and I'll show you what that looks like. It's basically check here to agree to our terms. Please don't be mean on the internet. Don't abuse our resources, et cetera, et cetera. Whatever you guys need to put in there. This is always kind of a personal flavor thing, from organization to organization. If you're extremely strict, we can do a lot of different things right there. Once folks are logged in through the portal, it helps us identify that traffic. We can even tie those logins to their MAC address, so we can basically keep them tied to that device. If we need to, we can limit network connections by users, and we can also authenticate them against local directory radius or active directory, or OAuth now in the captive portal. We can separate the mobile devices for BYOD policy. So that's a very common thing with Untangle, and I'm going to show you guys what that looks like. To have a normal network with a couple of different interfaces, you've got your local network, but then you also have, like a wireless access point for something like public Wi-Fi. We can either filter that or bypass it based on a number of different criteria, but we can very easily keep all that stuff separate. We do allow you to customize the look and feel of the captive portal page. It's a free app, so it's a little bit limited, but you can go in and customize it if you want to. You can actually create your own page and upload that as a zip file and then use that. We would like to always, if we can, separate the wireless to a different interface altogether. In a router mode, we can do that with VLANs. That's a very simple thing. And then we can actually set up a policy based on that interface. We would say, if you come in on the Wi-Fi interface or VLAN 2, you come here to the BYOD policy. And I can show you guys what that looks like here in just a second. But that's a very clean way of separating traffic like that. Also, in the tag structures, we can use some of the new functionality in Untangle starting version 13 to use our tag and trigger system. A tag just tags a host or a device or a user, if you have usernames, to just kind of give you a quick reference. So you could do this manually. You could do this. You can automate this through triggers. If there's, for example, certain traffic coming in on a certain interface, we could set up a trigger and maybe tag that as BYOD. From there, we can set up a policy that says tag is BYOD, always come over here. So I'll show you that because it's a lot to talk about without kind of a visual. But the triggers are just basically automated tagging. And then, through those triggers, we can actually proactively manage devices and things like that with Policy Manager, like I was saying, because we can automate the tagging and then just have it push them through different policies based on tags. Right now, I'm going to hop out of the slide deck here and jump over to our demo server. So bear with me one sec. We'll jump over right here, and I'm going to reconnect because that's been open for 30 minutes. If anybody wants to follow along, we are on our demo server here. This is just demo.untangle.com up there. This is running our newest version 13.2 here. So what we're going to jump into is basically what I would walk you through as one of our support techs would, setting this up to capture public or BYOD, whatever it is, traffic, with or without authentication and some policy management. So excuse me, here on our dashboard, like I said, this thing's fully customizable. One of the real handy widgets that we've added is the policy overview you can see right here in the middle of my screen. And this is the different policies that I was mentioning. We would create a BYOD policy, and we're going to walk through that, and I'll show you. But this is basically where we can create a rule that says, you can see we're kind of set up as a school on a demo server there. So I could say, if a device comes in on a certain interface, or it's a certain vendor, for mobile devices, or it's a certain MAC address, I can just push them through one of these policies with a rule, make a BYOD policy with all these apps that are being inherited or completely original permissions. A lot of different ways to do this. The important part is getting the traffic into Untangle. So under apps, I would personally kind of start with directory connector. If you have some kind of directory to authenticate, we're talking like Active Directory, Radius, or like Google, Office 365, Facebook for OAuth. This is where we actually set up that authentication. So you can come over here and enable whichever one is relevant to you. And if it's Active Directory, we also need you to install our notification API on your domain controller. And then basically we're seeing your directory leveraged. So you've got usernames, et cetera, et cetera. So you can create policies. That's not necessary to create policies. But if I had one of those directories leveraged, that would be the first thing I would do, would set up directory connector. The policies themselves are pretty interesting and pretty easy. I'm actually going to walk through the motions here. It won't let me save my policy on the demo server, but I'm going to show you what I would do. So I would come say, I'm going to do BYOD policy. So the parent is basically saying, do you want this new policy, BYOD, to inherit the permissions from another policy? I'm choosing a parent policy for this new policy if I want to. So I could say, yes, I want them to inherit all the rules from the student policy or default policy. I personally don't want them to inherit anything right now. So I'm going to say none. And I'm going to add that, and it won't save this. Poof. So on a policy, you see it's basically a set of applications. So if I wanted to over here, I can install any of these from the policy right here. Or I could go out to my actual apps menu and do it there. So what I did was create a list of apps basically, and it didn't really do anything. If you don't create a custom rule to send traffic into that policy, they'll just go into your default. So the rules are crucial. You'll see my demo server has no rules set up. So if this were a box in production, none of these policies would be valid except for default, because we don't have any customization. Everyone's still going through default. So there are a lot of different ways to do this. For what we've just been talking about, you could do tag is BYOD, and then the target policy is where they need to go. That's where we would see BYOD policy. And then that's a pretty easy way to do that. You could add more conditions to that though if you wanted to. You could say tag is BYOD and they're coming in on this interface and it's this time of day and it's this day of the week and they're using these mobile devices. There's a lot of different ways to push people through a policy is what I'm getting at. I don't know that there's a limit to the number of these conditions you can use. If you need to go that specific, you could. You know, I could say people that are tagged BYOD coming in on VLAN 2 and it's noon to 1:30 on Monday or Tuesday, and the vendor is Apple. I want them to always come through BYOD, admins, whatever it is. So that's the policy creation. That's where we would actually start to separate this traffic. Once we get the policy created, we're able to go in and actually install apps for those policies. I wanted to show you my teacher policy here because as you can see, these are all grayed out except for web filter there. So each policy can have custom apps that aren't inherited from anywhere. So you can see teachers is inheriting default. That's why it's indented like that. So if I wanted to change virus blocker for the teachers, I would change it up here on default, or I would go install it for the teachers. So I don't mean to be long-winded about the policy creation, but there are so many different options. As long as the traffic is coming through Untangle, we can do all kinds of fun things. Another thing that we would do, specifically per policy, would be to install the captive portal. So I'm going to go out to my default policy where there's a captive portal. So basically, all the apps down below are inheriting the captive portal right now. So I want to go change my portal. So this is what captive portal looks like. You can see we've got this one just disabled on the demo, so you can just enable it right there. And I don't have any logons. You'll see stats, quick metrics right here. And you'll also get some really handy reports. If you want to just take a quick look at successful logins, you can do that. If you want to see, drops, timeouts, that kind of stuff, top active users, all those reports live here. And like I said, if you do need something customized, you're not seeing a report you want, we can come customize this report, or we could always just create a new blank report. So within the captive portal page, within the settings, the actual capture rule is kind of the magic that happens and pushes people through the portal and presents it to them. So this is almost always related to Wi-Fi, public Wi-Fi, which makes sense, right? You go to a coffee shop, you go to the gym, things like that. They present you a portal page and you say, yes, I agree, et cetera, et cetera. With our capture rules, we can, like this one saying, anything coming in on a non-WAN is going to get the captive portal. We're capturing their traffic. We can enable that right here. This is built in for you, it's already there. But maybe they're not coming in on a non-WAN. So there are a lot of different conditions. We can really push a captive portal in front of any traffic you want. So don't feel like this is only limited to Wi-Fi. You know, if you wanted to push a captive portal in front of everyone who's going to a certain URI, we could do that. Certain devices, certain users, certain ports, interfaces, even users in groups from like Active Directory. If Active Directory has a group called BYOD, which it probably won't, you could say group is, and then we could present the portal to them. So there's a lot of ways to do this. We almost always do it though, by an interface. If they're coming in on a non-WAN, if they're coming in on, the BYOD interface, VLAN 4, whatever it's called, present the portal. Here on the past hosts tab is where we're just able to pass clients and servers to not get the portal. So if there's a client or a machine on the certain policy and they just don't want the portal, they don't need it, you can always come in here and just pass them. This is a real simple rule when you click add here. It's just a quick little IP rule. So When we come to the captive page, I actually want to kind of skip this and then come back to it because I want to show you the user authentication. So I mentioned we can have Active Directory force people to log in if we wanted to. This is an interesting thing too, because if you set this up with something like Active Directory or Radius authentication, or even OAuth, it doesn't matter the device they're on. You know, they're set up to authenticate, you know, based on the network interface, et cetera, et cetera. So depending on whether or not you have something like this to leverage, it can really help with reporting and identifying traffic visibility, because you'll see, oh, it's actually, you know, Chad.lastname at Gmail who's doing this instead of 192.168.2.12. So that can be a really handy thing. So if you have authentication, you can leverage it here. And this is also where our session settings live for the portal. If you want, you can update all this. These are basically the default settings. This is my demo server with no changes. So the idle timeout is set to 0. The timeout is set to 60 minutes. So if you want to change that, you can. If you want to allow cookie-based authentication, that's not checked by default, but you can do that as well. People just log in once in the morning and then they're there for the day with their cookie. The concurrent logins is always checked. We want to be able to allow more than one person. We can also track these logins using MAC address. So this is an interesting thing too, because maybe I sign in, you know, chad.mcnaughton@gmail, whatever my email is. You can still tie that email sort of to my MAC address. You know, my MAC address won't change. So in addition to a tag, which will live on my MAC address forever, you can track my MAC address with a login here on the portal as well. And then you see the standard cookie timeout is set for 24 hours, 1,440 minutes. So if you want to change that, you can change it there. So this is just basically authentication and then session settings on the authentication tab here. If you have any questions about this, feel free to holler at us. We have a lot of documentation on our wiki. This is one of the free apps, you know, so there's a ton of documentation out there because it's open source. We have clients that, you know, only need a captive portal. So that's fine. You know, it's why it's there. It's why it's free. So if that's something you need, there's a lot of documentation out there, and our support team can also help you out with any email questions, things like that. So on the actual captive page, there are 3 different options. By default, we're just showing a basic message. So as it stands right here, the page title is Captive Portal. It's going to say, welcome to the Untangle Captive Portal. You have to click continue to connect to the internet. But I personally always check this box here. Clicking here means you agree to the terms above. And then you can change all this text. If you have any questions, contact your administrator. And this is where the branding manager comes in handy, because it presents that different admin text. You're the administrator, we aren't. So this is just the basic message. You know, you can change any of this around. You want to edit all this. The other section I want to talk about there at the bottom is the certificate detection. This won't change depending on the page options here. The certificate detection is actually a very important distinction and something we should talk about, because this is going to come down to how strictly you need to filter BYOD. If you need to strictly filter BYOD, see their HTTPS traffic, things like that, you'll most likely need to try to deploy the Untangle root certificate to those devices. We do this through the portal. It's a very simple interaction with end users. If they get prompted for the root certificate, it's the last time I tried this, it was basically, yes, I agree. I click download to the cert, and then it installs into your browser and you can get on. So some phones have changed a little bit here over the last couple of years. You know, newer Android phones reject things like that. Certain apps are doing app pinning, which is a new fun thing. This is where we can get the cert to a device though. And that's what creates a trusted man in the middle relationship between the Untangle and that mobile device. So Untangle will then be decrypting that device's HTTPS. So if you need to be very strict and you want to really, really block things and filter things on mobile devices, this is kind of a necessary evil, pushing that device or that certificate to the device. That option, like I said, doesn't change if we switch this to have a login. Like I said, we could, you know, make people log into their whatever it was, Gmail here. I'm going to stop typing. I'm making that up. Whatever you're authenticated against, they'll just get the same portal page with a username and password, and then you can enter the same text. You know, if you have any questions, contact your admin. Please be nice on our network. And then, you know, possibly you will be required to download a root certificate. So if that's something that might break traffic and it's a necessity to have BYOD on the network, then we can always disable the certificate detection. And And then we would want to use web filters SNI options under web filter advanced settings. Those are server name indicator rules, basically host name filtering rather than looking for HTTPS and doing full deep packet inspection. Host name blocking is not a complete solution anymore for HTTPS. So that is a bit of a limitation in some places, but we do still offer SNI. We use it a lot in our SSL Inspector app to look for host names for things like google.com, bing.com, search engines specifically, but it is still valid. So for any weird little device that can't receive the Untangle certificate, we can always do things like SNI settings. There are, excuse me, there are some little devices out there using HTTPS now that just don't even have browsers, so you can't even push a cert to them. So things like a smart thermostat, a Nest thermostat, or an Amazon Echo, things like that. They don't have browsers, so they don't get certificates. So we keep those protected still. They're behind an Untangle, they're sealed off to the world, but we can still also kind of do some of the filtering and blocking and things like that through the actual SNI settings in WebFilter. The other option here on the Captive Portal page is to redirect sessions. If you want to, you can do a session redirect if you want to send someone to a separate, like HTTPS login page for your work login, something like that, file share. We can always redirect them right there. And then you can also, like I said, create your own custom page. I've never really seen a custom page uploaded that didn't work. They can actually accept some pretty advanced code, it seems like. So we obviously don't create these, we don't really support them, but there are some templates on our wiki site under the Captive Portal heading for wiki. There are quite a few templates in there, and then our user forums are a great resource for this because this is an open source app, so the community is kind of helping maintain it and customize it for us. So there are some templates out there for other custom Captive pages. So if you get one, we just get it zipped up, and we can upload that zip file right here, and then it'll show you the file it's always being used. If you need to, we can do some more options on the redirect here on a custom page. For example, host names instead of IPs, things like that, same redirect. And then we can also block instead of capturing unauthenticated connections. So if they don't log in or trying to connect, we can just block those instead of trying to capture them and redirect them. Like I said, the reports for Captive Portal are really handy. I think they jump into some of the quick and easy, pieces of information you want to see, just summary, activity summary, what's happening in my Captive Portal, logins, timeouts, easy stuff like that. The cool thing about Captive Portal is that it does, obviously leverage other apps like Directory Connector, things like that. But what it really is, obviously, it's a portal, it's a gateway to get into Untangle and have your traffic filtered and shaped. So once they've agreed, once they've authenticated whatever it is, they're on their policy, then they're coming through all the apps that you give them. So if you have them, if you have the students coming through, they'll be getting custom web filter rules right here, but then inheriting rules from everywhere else. So if we wanted to, we would come in here and, we can always come in and check these SNI options, like I mentioned, for devices that don't receive certificates. And then you can kind of just start filtering those devices to your heart's content. This is, like I said, this part is always going to be kind of a personal flavor type thing based on your organization. Like the example I used was a church. A small church with 20 local machines will need to change things when it is a Sunday, or they have a function on a Wednesday night or something like that. BYOD suddenly happens. So for that, maybe their local machines don't have a lot of filtering, a lot of shaping, things like that, but maybe they want to focus all that on the bigger network when BYOD starts kicking in on a couple nights a week. So for that, we would want to do different web filtering. We can do all the filtering and the blacklisting, whitelisting right here per group. So if BYOD needs very specific rules here, we could come in and just say, okay, so BYOD only has access to certain things. If you wanted to, you could, for example, come in here and block the entire internet for them and only open up a few sites. That rule right there will block it all. There's no URL on earth without a period in it somewhere. And then you could come to past sites and whitelist a few things like the organization's site or resources, things like that, file shares. So depending on how strict you need to be, the long story short is that Captive Portal is interesting because it's a free app that ties into Directory Connector for authentication. From there, you're able to leverage any other app that you have installed. So everything you see on my screen here is included in our complete package. A couple of these apps are redundant actually for demo purposes. Spam Blocker Lite, Web Monitor don't install with their full versions installed. But all this is available with our complete package. And then, as I said, maybe not everyone getting the captive portal needs all these apps. We can customize that by group, by time of day, all kinds of different things. There's really nothing we can't do on the traffic once we're seeing it, and especially when we're doing the deep packet inspection, decrypting SSL traffic. So with that happening, we can do some really interesting things. Maybe the policies set up by MAC addresses. We're just doing certain things for Apple devices, certain things for Samsung devices. There's all kinds of different ways to do this. What I really just want to get through to you guys here on the webinar today is that Captive Portal by itself is a really handy free app, but it's a portal. It's a doorway to everything else that Untangle offers. So depending on the organization, if you're needing to really strictly filter the internet, things like that, our complete package is almost always the best value, specifically for filtering the internet with mobile apps. That's going to require 2 to 3 to 4 apps with Web Filter, SSL Inspector, and Application Control minimum. It's 2018. About 80% of the entire internet, at least here in the States, is fully encrypted with HTTPS. If you're not able to decrypt that traffic to scan it, you're only going to filter about 20% of the internet. So this is a roundabout way of me saying SSL inspection, deep packet inspection is what I call kind of a necessary evil now. If you want to really filter the internet in 2018, it is too encrypted to just throw a web filter up there and say we're filtering the internet, because you won't be. So if you're looking at things like things like SIPA, HIPAA compliance, that kind of stuff, we have to be able to do deep packet inspection to get your compliance standards. That's how we're able to, like I said, decrypt HTTPS down to HTTP so that these apps can scan it. That's kind of my spiel on the web filtering. If you want a little deeper rabbit hole on that, I'm happy to provide documentation if you guys like to get in touch with us. Support at untangle.com, sales at untangle.com, pre-sales at untangle.com. The BYOD environment is changing fast, as fast as we can keep up. So I mentioned, a few limitations with certain devices, certain vendors, Android specifically, but this is something that we all kind of need to wrap our heads around moving forward, because this is not going to stop. It's only just going to keep increasing. It's been almost exponential over the last 18 months to 2 years, the adoption of BYOD. So I think that it's better to be proactive always than retroactive. Someone bringing their device on your network without something like Untangle in front of them doesn't give you a lot of options if they get infected. You don't get to be very retroactive with ransomware and malware. You get victimized, So proactivity is paramount to me in the network security world. If we can get in front of things like that, and especially users, we're talking about end users now, which will always be the #1 problem for your malware and viruses and ransomware. We're talking about their own devices. We have to get something in between them and the internet. So Untangle is that thing. We're the gateway device. We're running Bitdefender and Clam AV for antivirus right here at the gateway, and Bitdefender and the Untangle Cloud are scanning for things like that. So if I come on your network with my own device, that kind of protection is even available. So, excuse me, we try to take them out of the equation because they're the problem. If they get an infected file, they click on it, you're infected. So we scan those files at the gateway. We try to keep that off the mobile devices, even the local machines for sure. But this is just, kind of the state of things these days. BYOD is taking over, and everyone is more or less a target. Like I showed you earlier, just even small businesses have become targets for things like this. So if you have, employee-owned devices that are exposed and unprotected on the network, I feel that's a really, really big vulnerability today, and an extremely big one going forward. That's all I've got for you guys on Captive Portal here. Shannon, do we have any questions hanging out there that we didn't get answered?
Yeah, there was some questions about the licensing, if you wanted to maybe go over that.
Okay. BYOD is interesting for our licensing because Untangle licensed by active hosts. So within Untangle, we're going to see all the IPs that are generating traffic behind us. If there's an IP sending packets, that is an active host and it counts against Untangle licensing, unless you come and do this. Thank you, Shannon. I was really hoping we get this question. Untangle offers layer 3 bypass rules. I don't see a lot of this in our industry for folks that license by IP like we do. So we don't want you to have to pay for every device on the network. So I mentioned specifically churches earlier because that's a very specific environment. They have a certain number of local machines, certain employee devices, that they leverage and use. But a day or two a week, their network explodes. So that can be a problem, obviously. So if you're licensed for 25 devices and then you have church service on a Sunday or a Wednesday and 100 devices show up, what happens? Well, by default, those devices outside of the license get on the network completely unfiltered. They're bypassed by default. So specifically for a church, that's not ideal because they don't want bad things on the screens. And I understand that. So they would want to filter all those devices very strictly. Some other organizations, maybe that's not practical, so we can actually come in here and bypass devices. So these will actually bypass a device's traffic around our layer 7 applications, and it removes this traffic from your licensing. So I always recommend bypassing things like printers and faxes and VoIP. You can see we have VoIP rules built in for you. If you have local security cameras, for example, you can bypass that entire network. In a small environment, especially when we get to talking BYOD, this can be crucial. So when we bypass stuff, what we're bypassing will be our layer 7 apps like web filter and SSL inspector and bandwidth control. So we're not going to license the filtering of these devices anymore, but they're still protected behind the Untangle because we're a very strict network security appliance with no open ports. If you want a hole punched to or from the outside world, you have to go tell Untangle there needs to be a hole. We are sealed off to the world. So these devices are still protected even though they're being bypassed around some of our applications. So if I didn't want to filter this printer here, I could just come in and say, I don't want to filter this thing. And so now it's bypassed. So I'm not paying to filter that thing's traffic anymore. So I do get the question. BYOD does change things, obviously, for licensing. But the bypass rules are crucial, especially in smaller environments, I think, because you can go in and just tell it, we only want to pay to filter these devices. These are all bypassed. So I think that's important because that is a unique thing for Untangle, to be able to basically remove traffic from your licensing. And it's still shapeable. We can still control the traffic through QoS. And like I said, it's still protected behind the firewall. We can even set up, if we wanted to, filter rules here at layer 3 or access rules for internal kind of firewall rules. So there's a lot of stuff available right there to still protect those devices. But I'm getting to the point now that I do recommend bypassing some public networks when it's not always practical. The devices are still protected, et cetera, et cetera. But if you don't need to strictly filter their content, yeah, we can bypass a lot of stuff and save some money in places. Any other questions, Shannon?
No, I think that's it for now. I know we have a few slides and we're getting a little short on time if we want to try and move on.
Yeah, you bet. So getting into the deployment, I mentioned this a little bit, but the Untangle solution is a piece of software. So we do sell appliances. Like I said, you can install that on your own. We do have a build now for the Amazon cloud. Our demo server is actually hosted in AWS. I believe our Azure build for Microsoft is in beta right now. And then we do use some third-party routers with our firmware, the Turris Omnia, like the older Linksys. This is basically a hybrid cloud product. So it is cloud managed, but it can be an on-premise box. So it's a really interesting thing because there's a lot of different ways to deploy it, but there's a ton of ways to manage it, whether it's through Command Center or just through, remoting into the gateway IP. You can do all that stuff from your phone, your tablet, whatever. And obviously because of those options, we have a way, way lighter hardware footprint because we can run pretty small. This is Linux Debian Jessie currently. So the RAM, the processor, that kind of thing, we can minimize those. If you look at our specs, and there's not an Untangle supercomputer out there, even for, up to 3,000 devices, things like that. Speaking of, this is our line of appliances right now. On the right, you'll see our new X series. Those are the ones we're all personally drooling over and waiting to get at our houses because they're awesome. If you're looking for something for up to about 50 devices, something like that, the X series are great. You know, the hardware is a little newer and a little beefier, and the price point's really nice. But you can see on the left side, we do have, you know, a couple of 1U rack mounts, and then the M series is our 2U rack mount, kind of a bigger, just below enterprise level router. These are all available on untangle.com under the appliances tab. You can see all our specs, all our prices, everything right there. And I've talked about most of this already. You know, the key differentiators, you know, these deployments can be built specifically, you know, based on our professional services. If you want to help us to help you with the setup and install, the configuration, we can do all of that right out of the gate. And then, you know, I think the default settings are basically our best practices. I get that question a lot. What are Untangle's best practices? Well, if you run through the Untangle setup wizard, and you install the recommended apps, those are our best practices. So those are the apps we think should be installed with the filtering or the blocking, et cetera, within those apps. So if you want just kind of a baseline best practices, install the Untangle recommended apps. We can also help with things like traffic shaping. I mentioned bandwidth control, QoS as well for that bypass traffic. And we can do things like quotas and penalty boxes, push people over there with no bandwidth where they feel shame for a couple of minutes. And then we also do the automatic seamless upgrades. So if you set it to auto upgrade, you can schedule that too if you wanted to do it, you know, midnight on a Saturday. Our version upgrades never cost anything. So it's a pretty seamless thing unless we're doing a really big revision with a Linux kernel update. For the most part, we don't even need a reboot after an upgrade unless there's a kernel revision, then we'll reboot you. And it is flexible and cost competitive. You know, like I said, it's software based and can be installed all over the place. What we're talking about here, Captive Portal, is part of our freemium package, our freeware. So if you want the free package, you'll get a couple of fun apps, and then you could actually do a complete package on top of that at some point, or add an app or two here or there. And then we do cloud-based central management through Command Center. Your first 5 eligible Untangle servers will appear in Command Center for free, and then we do licensing models, sort of like our device bands. And that includes the on-box reports. Some of the coolest stuff in Command Center is the alerts now. Things like being able to just ping an admin, you know, when a certain event happens on the box. I don't know if the box is down, but the cloud isn't. So we can actually set up some really custom alerts in the cloud now through Command Center. That's a handy thing. We just hit the Q&A slide. I jumped the gun earlier, but anything left? Nothing?
No, that's it, Chad, if we want to kind of wrap it up.
Okay, yeah.
I think we have some slides. Yeah, so go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. We just like to throw this out there, you know, for you guys who are kind of new to Untangle, if this was something you Googled or someone told you about, I would like to tell you that this is actually Untangle's 15th year in existence. We're not a startup, we're not new, anything like that. We are just, you know, kind of doing our thing. We are winning some awards here, as you can see. We've been voted the best software firewall, best content filter appliance on Spiceworks. It's a really interesting product. It's a really interesting company, and we're very active in these different communities. We're very active in the Linux community. So, you know, just a little bit of a, you know, more than word of mouth here for you to be kind of reassured with. And then if you want to, you can jump on our site and see case studies, customer quotes. Maybe there's an organization that's similar to yours using Untangle. Feel free to hit us up at sales@untangle.com if you have any questions about things like that. There's a lot of stuff on our YouTube and our site as well, though. And then I'll let Shannon talk about our cool new trade-up program.
Right, thanks, Chad. Yeah, for those of you who are looking at Untangle, maybe have a older subscription or appliance and looking to trade up to get something new and fresher in your environment, we do have a trade up program that offers some special discounts if you do trade in your existing Untangle subscription or appliance. We also have those who, if you're looking at a competitor's or you have a competitor's product, we do offer also trade in a program for that as well if you end up choosing Untangle. And then on the right hand side, we know that a lot of you use Untangle at home, which is great. And if you bring us to your work, you get some special pricing as well. I don't have any pricing because I'm not in sales. So give us a call or email your account rep if you have one, or just sales@untangle.com so they can get you that pricing. There was a question about reseller pricing. Please contact us at sales@untangle.com so we can discuss that with you. And all of our pricing is online. We didn't have time to show you today. If you go to untangle.com, click the big blue buy button in the right-hand side, you can look at all the pricing on there. We don't require you to call us if you don't want to, but if you want to chat with someone, make sure you're getting the right package or subscription. We're here to chat. Untangle is going to RSA conference. If you're not aware, RSA is one of the largest security conferences in the world. They're in San Francisco in a couple weeks, in 2 weeks. So if you're going to be in San Francisco or you live in San Francisco in the area or are coming out, please stop by our booth. We're excited. We'll have some exciting new announcements during the show. So come stop by and say hi. We'd love to chat with you. And I believe that's about it. Don't see any other questions that weren't answered. So if we didn't get to your question or if we weren't able to help, please call us or email us. We'll be happy to get you that answer. Thank you, Chad, for the great demonstration and presentation, and we hope to see you all next time. Thanks, everyone.